She has tear ducts. Someone cut them into the stone at the inner corner of each eye, along with the curve of her lips and the braid running back through her hair. She is about 1900 years old. She is carved from Cotswold limestone, and she was lying face up in a ditch under the floor of a church in Buckinghamshire that no longer exists. There were two others with her, a man and a child. Nobody knows who they are. There is no name on them, no inscription, nothing written anywhere on any of the three. And there is an argument, still unresolved, about what they were doing there at all. Start with the church, because the church is the reason anyone was digging. St. Mary's, Stoke Mandeville. Not the church in the village now. The old one, half a mile out, standing on its own in a field. It went up in the 1100s. Nave and chancel, 2 rooms, the standard shape. The chancel was pushed further east in the 1200s. An aisle was added along the south side in the 1340s. A timber porch, sometime around 1500. And then, in the 1600s, somebody built a brick tower onto the front of it, roughly 5 meters by 2.5. That is 700 years of a building being altered by people who are all now dead in a parish that kept using it the whole time. It was repaired in 1827. Scratched into a buttress on the west wall, there is a circle with a hole at the center and more than 20 lines radiating out from it, probably a mass dial, a sundial for telling the congregation when the service starts. Then, in the 1880s, the village built a new church closer to where people actually lived. And this one stopped. After 1886, nobody used it. It stood empty for 80 years and fell apart slowly, the way abandoned buildings do. And then, in the 1960s, the Royal Engineers demolished what was left of it. The Army knocked the walls down. What survived was the footprint, under the soil, in a field, which is where it sat until a railway was routed across it. If you find this sort of thing worth a quarter of an hour of your evening, subscribing costs you nothing, and it is the only thing that tells the algorithm to show you the next one. In 2021, archaeologists working ahead of High Speed 2 excavated the site completely, because the line was going over it and it was not going to be there afterwards. That work was done by a contractor called Fusion, with a firm called LP Archaeology, led on site by Dr. Rachel Wood, alongside Mike Court, the lead archaeologist for High Speed 2 itself. I am naming them because almost nothing you will read about this site does, and because these are the people who actually saw the ground. They dug down through the Norman levels, and underneath they found something older. Flint walls, not a scatter of stones. Walls forming a square, burials around them, and in places, floor surfaces still surviving. Around the square structure ran a circular ditch. Dr. Rachel Wood, the lead archaeologist on the site, said that to have so much of it remaining, the walls and even some flooring, would tell them a great deal about what happened here before the Normans. Her team called it a once-in-a-career opportunity. Now, listen to how carefully they described what they had found. Not the Saxon church. A possible Saxon church. Pre-Norman, potentially Saxon. The reason for the caution is that dating a building with no writing on it is hard. There is no inscription. There is no foundation stone. What they had was a shape, a square of a particular size with a ditch around it, and the shape looked like something. Specifically, it looked like St. Peter's at Barton-upon-Humber in Lincolnshire, which is one of the best-known surviving Anglo-Saxon churches in the country. That is a real argument, and it is also worth being clear about what kind of argument it is. It is not a date. It is a resemblance. Two buildings can share a footprint for reasons other than being built in the same century, and the people who dug this one said possible and potentially rather than is. which is the correct thing to say when a resemblance is what you have. And there was one more thing about those pre-Norman foundations. Roman roof tile, built into them, not lying nearby, in them. Somebody, before the Normans, was building with Roman material. The archaeologists were careful about that too. There was a Roman settlement not far away, so the tile might have come from a structure somewhere else entirely and been carted in. They said so at the time. That was November 2021. 11 months later, at the very end of the dig, they were taking apart the rubble in that circular ditch. And they found the woman, then the man, then the child. 3 carved stone busts, heads and upper bodies, sitting in the fill of a ditch that had been quietly holding them for the better part of 2,000 years. The stone is high quality, Bibury type, from the Cotswolds, not local, brought in. They are in extraordinary condition. Cleaning brought out the tear ducts, the shape of the mouth, the braiding in the woman's hair. And that condition is itself a piece of evidence, because stone left standing outside in an English climate for 19 centuries does not look like that. Whatever these 3 stood in, it had a roof. There is a detail on them that the specialists could not match anywhere. Where you would expect arms, there are carved leafy motifs instead. Not damage. Deliberate, carefully cut foliage in place of shoulders and arms. The people who examined them said that as far as they knew, that does not appear on other portrait busts. There is no paint left on them, no pigment at all, and no lettering. On dating, the specialists, Penny Coombe, Kevin Hayward, and Martin Hennig, put them as possibly as early as the end of the 1st century after Christ, though they note that the closest parallels for the woman's hairstyle turn up more often in the early 2nd, and they were not alone in the ground. Out of the same excavation came Roman cremation urns, large roof tiles, painted wall plaster, and a hexagonal glass jug, in fragments but so complete that the nearest comparison anyone could offer was a whole one in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. That is not domestic rubbish. Nobody throws that away. So what were they? The specialist's answer is 1 sentence long, and every word of it is chosen. The busts, they said, could be representations of a family group from inside a Roman mausoleum. Could be. A family group. From inside, not from the site, from inside a mausoleum. And this is where it gets genuinely unresolved, so I am going to show you the disagreement rather than pick a side. In November 2021, before the busts came out, the archaeologists described that square structure with its circular ditch as the pre-Norman church. Roman tile reused in its foundations, possibly carted from somewhere else. After October 2022, once the busts and the urns and the glass had been recovered, the sequence was being described differently. A Roman building first, possibly a mausoleum. Then an Anglo-Saxon church on the same spot. Then the Norman one, put up directly over the top of the demolished Roman structure. The reasoning behind the change: the finds are too ornate for a house. Those 2 versions are not the same. In the first, the square building is Saxon and the Roman material is imported. In the second, there is a Roman building underneath, and the Saxons built into what was already there. I cannot tell you which is right, and here is the honest reason. The first description was made before anyone knew the busts existed. It is entirely reasonable that finding 3 carved family portraits changes how you read the ground. But nobody has published that reasoning, so I am not going to put words in anyone's mouth. Here is what this does not show. It does not show that these 3 people were buried at Stoke Mandeville. Sculpture travels. A mausoleum is where a portrait might stand, not proof of where a body lies. It does not show that anyone deliberately built a church on a Roman tomb. That is the version the internet will give you, and nothing published supports it. It does not show who they were. No name, no inscription, no lettering of any kind on any of the three. And it does not show the dates cleanly either. On when the Norman church went up, one account says 1080, very shortly after the conquest. The county's own heritage record dates the building to the 1200s. That is a 20-year gap between two published sources on a fairly basic question, and I am flagging it rather than quietly choosing the one I prefer. So, the last thing. Count what has stood on that piece of ground: a Roman settlement nearby and Roman roof tile in the earth, a square building with a ditch around it, an Anglo-Saxon church, or a Roman one, depending on which description you read. A Norman church, going up around 1080. Then 7 centuries of that church being extended, aisled, porched, and towered. Then abandonment in the 1880s. Then the Royal Engineers pulling down the walls in the 1960s. Then archaeologists in 2021. And then a railway. The whole site now lies under the line. It was fully excavated first, which is why we know any of this. But it is gone. The 3 of them went on display in Aylesbury at the Discoverbucks Museum in the summer of 2022. Not permanently. It was a loan, from the middle of July to the end of October. 15 weeks. Then they came off display. Where they are now, I have not been able to find out. And the work that would settle what they were doing under that church has not been finished. The 3 people who examined them are the ones who catalogue Roman sculpture in Britain for a living. Combe, Hayward, and Hennig are among the authors of the standard corpus of Roman sculpture for London and the Southeast. If anyone is going to publish on these, it is them. 4 years on, as far as I can find, they have not. So we have 3 faces, cut carefully enough that you can see her tear ducts, and no idea who they are.